All right, hello, back again on our trust class, our trust, Notre Dame de Paris trust class. And today we're super lucky to have Nat Crosby, who's an architect and has been working with Hans House for a long time on these projects, on all of their projects, and has an incredible depth of knowledge that he's been willing to share with our students. And we're going to start today with a lecture from him about drawing and the models. So I'm going to hand it over to you, Nat.
Okay. Good afternoon, or whatever time it is, wherever you are in the world. So I did change up the name of the presentation a little bit because there's more to it than just drawings. And so it's kind of how do we interpret the graphic evidence that we have available to us for any project, and how do we discover both the readily apparent information, but also the hidden information through the recreation of an object that gives us an insight into the built environment that just a study on paper might not do so. And but I like to think back that kind of this lesson here that every reconstruction is wrong, and the only real question is how wrong is it? And I think it's a little bit of pessimism from Simon James here, but I think it is a good reminder that what we do is some form of interpretation, and as more information arises, that interpretation can and probably should change given the new information. And so just to high level thinking about source information, there's utilizing the plan of St. Gall as an example. What we do know is that this parchment plan is kind of a secondary copy of some earlier primary source, and then there has been many interpretations and redrawings of that plan throughout the ages. And so we always need to be conscious about how we interpret that information and what might be known at the time that it was created. The plan of St. Gall, you can here are three examples of illustrative work, or either in drawing or in model form, of what the monastery might have looked like. And these are can be very superficial studies of what this was, or they can be very in-depth information, as was or studies that were developed in the famous works by Horn and Bourne in the late 70s. So we need to understand what are our sources, what is the information we can get out of it, and how do we interpret that? So here are some case studies, and Hans House was long involved in a synagogue study program on the synagogues of Poland, and particularly the wooden synagogues. And all of these synagogues were destroyed by the end of World War II. Luckily, there was kind of a great going out into the wilderness after World War I to document these structures by architecture students and professors, some of whom are still around with us today. And these were documented in both photographs and measured drawings, and can be are a great testament of what existed for architecture within this typology at that period of time. And one of these synagogues, although destroyed in World War I, was heavily documented prior to its destruction, and that would be the Gevorgid Synagogue. And one of our projects was to reconstruct its bema. And this is a raised platform within, centrally located within the prayer hall. And we had a variety of information that we could utilize to understand what it was. And so we had these drawings by Breer, and we can have a certain amount of trust within the information that he presented in these drawings, in part because they align with the photographic evidence that was taken at the same time, and because of their accuracy across the other drawings. So he wasn't making careless mistakes just in order to illustrate the information. And it was, drawn in particular as its own entity. There were some color studies of the paintwork done on it, and that allowed us, along with the photographs, to recreate initially digitally what this bema might look like, and how could we reconstruct it at full size. And so we were able to utilize those photographs, the drawings, and the computer CAD work to check ourselves before we started cutting into timbers. When we did the various mock-ups, can we recreate the same vantage points, the same lens information that the photographs are taken? Are we accurately aligning ourselves with the evidence that we have? And then that eventually was painted and installed at the museum in Warsaw. A second case study is Leslie College of Art and Design and its library, which is this church structure here. And this I did at Brunner Cott a bunch of years ago now. And what we had is a church that had been actually moved from Harvard Square in the late 19th century down Mass Avenue to Porter Square, similar location to where it is now. It actually was where this new structure is, and had been raised up and modified a little bit, and its cupola had been also modified. And it originally had when Isaac Melvin built it in 1945, a Wren-styled octagonal spire. At some point, likely during the move in the late 19th century, that was taken down, and this neoclassical cupola was built. And then 1967, the cupola was struck by lightning and burned down to this center section here, and a fairly sad spire was added on top of it, which we understood needed to go. And through the design process, it was decided to rebuild the spire, and that the neoclassical spire was the appropriate one, and particularly because this was going to become a library and no longer a religious structure, it spoke better to that. It also luckily had more information for us to be able to reconstruct it, and we worked closely with the Cambridge Historical Commission, which they were able to provide the photograph on the left, which gave us, although partially hidden by the trees, it gave us a good vantage point to understand what that spire was. Luckily for us, Walker Evans came by and at some point and took a large format glass plate photo of the church, and that was in the collections of the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and we were able to get them to perform a high definition scan of that photograph, which really gave us the fundamentals of information to recreate what we then did recreate. And some of the items of note that we really wanted to make sure we got right were not only the proportions of the overall structure, but also the overall depths of the architecture and the moldings of the pilasters, that they accurately stand out and give their shadows as they would have had before, which can easily be kind of flattened and foreshortened and within a recreation. Some other fun notes and details is that when this church was being documented as part of its national registration process, the architectural historians looked at the capitol at the upper left photograph and mistakenly understood that to be some form of Egyptian capital. And they had noted that as something of interest and that should be, was an important part of the building and the streetscape. But interestingly enough, over the course of the years that this project was in our office, we discovered that indeed there actually was some other information there, and that these were wood acanthus leaves that had been rotted and struck off at some point and was kind of parged over, which gave it its kind of Egyptian look to it. But we were able to discover in an Asher Benjamin book, and likely the source information for Isaac Melvin himself, the Temple of the Winds capital that we were able to recreate. And so we were able to use the same source information, or likely the same source information, to recreate the capitals. And then for the acrotarium components on the pediment, these had been lost or removed from the architecture by the time we were brought onto the project. Luckily, we did find the center section within the attic of the church, and that became a very important component of being able to understand what we were seeing in the photographic evidence. And so it was decided to recreate these, and for the center one, fairly straightforward to recreate what we had evidence of and be able to accurately measure that. But also using the photographic evidence to recreate the side, the corner ones, and utilize the center portion to help us define, what these sizes are. How did the artisans carve these pieces? How deep were they carving the relief into? All of those components we were able to understand because we had information, physical information that we would not have been able to understand from the photographs alone. And I think it's important also to note that we rebuilt these utilizing the same methodologies that they would have been built before. So even though other options were available, they could have been made out of glass reinforced fiber, or we even pondered 3D printing them in some form. That being able to utilize the same artisanal crafts that were utilized in the original construction allowed us to more truthfully recreate their forms, that they would have had the same kind of source information or source losses that you could expect through documentation by converting the information to some other form of construction. So the use of the hand really does, or the use of the same methodologies really does inform how you document it and how you build it. And then also for the cupola in general, we were able to recreate the same cupola information from the photographs, and the timber structure within is completely conjectural, but allowed us to have the same kind of structural language and the same kind of story that I think the university really appreciated, that the spire was built in the same manner as it would have built in the 19th century. And now we come to our project of the day, and I was really taken aback initially looking at Notre Dame de Paris, that I was expecting, having worked on much more unknown projects, much more lesser structures, less studied, that there would be a lot more information I was expecting on Notre Dame de Paris, that we would have really high level of detailed information right from the start. But to my surprise, there really was a limited accurate drawing information online and even in the archives in France that we could readily jump into. And in addition to that, because of it's a well-known building, there is tons and tons of misleading information that is out there. What we do know is that there is no one structural language that can be defined for every truss member, and so finding one drawing shouldn't just be utilize an excuse to replicate it throughout. And even in the information that we do know, some of the more readily available information was documentation from Eugene Viollet-le-Duc, and this provides us invaluable information. But we also must understand that the drawings that we have available to us from his point of view were drawings that were set up for publication. So these are not drawn in the field. There's a variety of interpretation and graphic simplification or graphic augmentation that has happened in order to get that in a format for print. And we do have photographs. Luckily, the structure survived until a point in which we were able to get good photographs. And these are a really good cross balance and check from what we do get and understand from drawings. Do the drawings correspond with the photographic evidence? And can the drawings help us understand the photographs as well? I think that the information can work both ways, and we just need to understand that maybe the drawings or the photographs are more of a primary source and the drawings a secondary source. Luckily, we had a really good study performed by Remy and Cedric that really allow us to have some detailed information about these trusses. And from my own experience in documenting roof trusses, it's not always the most pleasant place to be to document information. And so what are the types of information that can be readily documented while you're in the roof truss itself? What we see here are cross-sectional dimensions of each of the members, and from my own experiences, that those can be highly accurate. You can put a tape measure to the members at individual locations, and you can document that work. What can be more problematic, and what really is not really attempted to document in these drawings, are the overall dimensions of these members. When you're not able often to walk from one point to another, it can be difficult to get up into the very top. Laser pointers, although very helpful, can be difficult to use in these types of environments. Just to get the pointer to point at the right thing, there might be a member in the way, and you get all kinds of errors with your documentation. And what we do have are further documentation of the overall dimensions by Victor Kalam that give us our overalls. How long are these members? What is the overall geometry? But even this documentation relies back on the Remy drawings for the cross-sectional information. So both of these drawings work in hand. And we're very hopeful that at some point in the future, and hopefully the near future, we'll be able to get access to the laser scan information that was performed on Notre Dame, both by Andrew Tallon and the about 10 years ago, and other scans that were done after that point. And laser scans can be incredibly valuable to understanding really the small intricacies of the variations within each individual truss. And the key there is to be able to get enough laser scan information that you're not relying on points that were quite distant from the actual source, and understand that each truss shadows, like a photograph, all the information behind it. And so where are we? We have a couple series of drawings, and those drawings are coming together with Hans House in order to build the full sails truss into a working set of drawings that can be utilized to make a construction. And that is, that's, you can have drawings that look for documentation, but also there's a lot more that go into a set of drawings in order to convey information of how to make something to someone else, or even to your future self. And so we look forward to that development and helping to inform that information with the model making process. And that's where we are. We're here. I should have put in Catholic University as well, but that you're in the big U is we have, we've gone so far, and it's now time to start testing things and building things and informing our understanding of what has been presented to us. So thank you.
Thanks, that's great. I think it's really, oh, I don't know if this is on, can you hear me?
Yes.
That's awesome. It's really great to see the examples of the reconstruction. And I think your very first quote is something that Adnan asked us on the very first day to remember, sort of this idea of authenticity, and to start to really question it. So I think these examples or your precedents or the projects you've worked on are really super helpful. Any of the students, do you want to come up with any questions? Do you have any questions you want to ask? I know you're all knee deep in the truss itself, so we can maybe ask some general questions, and then we'll have to maybe go offline. So the rest of you out there watching will have to come back later or come in person to see it happen. But are there any questions from the students? Come on.
Hello. So my question is, in all the videos and research that I've been doing over the past couple weeks, I noticed that there are pulleys. There's like a pulley system within the roof. Do you know if that's going to be redone as well?
I don't know that the answer to that. A bunch of those pulleys were utilized not only for the construction or repair needs, but also for being able to lift items down in the actual sanctuary itself. So sometimes chandeliers or other apparatus down below. I don't know the answer to that question. I doubt that they will rebuild those unless there's a particular purpose for them. And
right. All right, thanks.
Nat, did you make the model that you showed were you part of that model from the synagogue?
Yes, I had made that digital model for the FEMA.
And it was in white oak, I'm presuming.
No, that was, no, that was in red. That we did that in red oak, just because I think the goal of the white oak for this project is that the building or the trusses were made in white oak, whereas the log structures and so forth that the synagogues were made in were not oak. They were likely linden and some other softwood species.
Do you have any kind of thoughts or comments about the scalability of the wood? When we're, full scale versus the model using the same material. What do you think about? Is there anything interesting or relevant?
Yeah, I think so. The scale that we're building these models at, 1 to 10, is great in a couple different ways. From just a conversion formula reason, it's super straightforward. From a scale and its attainability, it's large enough that we can put in all the detail that we want to put into it, but small enough that it can still move around and get around. To get to your question as to the oak, I think one of the kind of the woodworking, I like working in the oak, even though it's a really hard wood to initially form. It doesn't. What's nice about it, it doesn't break down over time as the model gets moved around. We can kind of be fairly confident that it's not going to get dinged up in ways that are frustrating if it was in basswood or in some other traditional model making material. It can suffer over its age fairly well. So that's one of the things I like about it. I think it could have been red oak, but I think the white oak will be really strong visually.
Hi, Nat. Can you hear me?
Yes.
This question is not really well formed. Maybe the students can come and help me a little bit with this. So I've been thinking a lot about measurements, of course, as we're working on this project, and the conversion between inches and centimeters, and thinking about how things are actually used as rulers back then. Have you done any extra research or anything that you can talk about? How they're using animal faces and king's hands and feet and can you talk
Sure.
about measurement discoveries and other parts of your research?
Yeah. Well, and I think there's I can answer that in a variety of different ways. From playing well with your neighbors, the metric system is great, and is readily attainable. So these have been documented in metric, and I think keeping it within the metric system allows us to talk to our friends in France and the rest of the world. When we were working on the synagogue project and traveling to Poland and documenting the churches in Poland, we always kept in the imperial system, and we were often criticized by the locals for not using the metric system, and our response, and I think rightfully so, is that these were not built in the metric system. They weren't necessarily built in the imperial system either, but we do understand that there was some form of imperial system that varied, grew, and shrank over over time, depending on who was in power and what era we were in, but was always somewhere similar to the feet and the inch of the imperial system. And it wasn't surprising to us that when measuring the thickness of a wall or the length of a wall, that those often came back in clean inch or foot like numbers that are just kind of feel very random when just documented in metric. But so the synagogues were often 36 feet by 36 feet. I mean, that's not only a clean number, but really kind of worked well with the numeral language of the rest of the structure. So when they were, if they were divided into thirds, it made sense. If it's divided in quarters, it made sense. So I guess that's my simple answer. And I find it an interesting debate. I think that there is a bunch of study, I believe, in the Horn and Bourne study for the plan of St. Gall that talks about the Carolingian foot and what that was.
Thank you.
Hello, Nat. My name
So,
is I had a quick question. I wanted to get your input and your thoughts about how long this process is going to take, seeing how the restoration of it. And I wanted to know if it is a concrete idea of we're just going to be going with the similar methods that they used when they first created the structure of the roof and spire, or they're going to be thinking about making it more, I guess, fireproof, I guess, for this case. And I wanted to hear your thoughts about that.
sure. I guess it's definitely completely constructible within a short period of time. There is documentation as to similar structures or of how long a crew of X size were able to create these trusses, and so we know that it can be done in the past, and also we know within the timber framing community in the present, how long it takes to convert a log to a piece of timber, so it's square, and then how long one should expect to cut each joint and make those connections. And so the question is, can we scale that up, or do we just have a smaller team working for a longer period of time? And I think it's a combination of both. From a fire point of view, within the International Building Code, and that's practiced in the United States, there is the ability to build heavy timber, which covers structures that are over a certain size, over a certain dimension for the individual pieces. And because we do know that generally when a timber burns, it burns by charring from the outside and working its way in, and it has a certain amount of protection that slows its fire spread. But within context of Notre Dame itself, we do also know that it burned fairly readily, and moved across from one side of the church to the other. And maybe it's a good thought that, and I don't know if they're doing this in the reconstruction, is that if there were some firewalls that separated the structure above into a couple of compartments, that spread, that movement of fire would have been much more easily maintained and wouldn't have moved from, with the wind from one end to another.
But yeah, see, the scaffolding got melted on when it burned up. I wonder if they're gonna be seeing what methods to restore it now to prevent all that from happening. But yeah, thank you very much, Nat. Thank you.
I think as a side note from, we have, particularly in New England, we have all these masonry and wood floored mill buildings. And it's always during the period of time in which these buildings are empty and under construction that they're most vulnerable to fire. And some of them have, readily burned down, but as soon as the renovations happen and partitions are installed, those fires are more difficult to spread.
Thank you.
All right, so all of you in the webinar world, you're going to have to come back or see our model in person because we're going to take this offline. So thanks, everyone. And we're going to just Zoom with, I'm going to stop the recording and figure out how to stop the webinar, but stay connected to you, Nat.
Okay, I'm here if you need me. If it